In a desert where hope had long turned to dust, a lion appeared at the edge of a nomad's camp. It didn't roar or flee. It simply stood there, its gaze heavy with meaning. From that moment, one woman dared to believe what no one else would, and so began a journey across the burning sands, guided not by sight but by faith, through silence, danger, and the promise of something divine. The desert had stopped breathing. Weeks had passed without a single drop of rain, and the tribe's wells had turned to dust. That night, the wind itself seemed tired, carrying only the scent of ash and the soft moan of dying camels. Around the campfire, faces were hollow and silent, their eyes reflecting the flames like trapped stars. Then, from the darkness beyond the circle of light, a shape began to form, a heavy, deliberate movement that made the air tighten. A lion stepped out of the shadows. His mane caught the firelight like threads of gold, and his eyes burned with a calm that didn't belong to a hunter. He did not growl, nor lower his head. He simply stood there, watching them. A young warrior reached for his spear, but an older voice broke the tension. "No," said the matriarch. Her hand, thin and trembling, lifted slightly. The tribe obeyed. She rose slowly, her shadow stretching long toward the lion. For a long moment, the two figures faced each other across the fire, the old woman and the king of the desert, both silent, both unafraid. Whispers spread among the people. Some said the beast had come for blood, others that it was a spirit of vengeance. But the matriarch's gaze softened, as if she saw something no one else could. "He's not here to kill," she murmured. "He's here to show us the way." The lion blinked once, turned his head toward the dunes, and vanished into the night. Only the echo of his steps remained, faint against the wind. The tribe stood frozen. No one spoke until the matriarch whispered to herself, barely louder than the fire's crackle, "Our ancestors have not forgotten us." Keelan, her son, clenched his fists beside her. "Mother," he said quietly, "you're seeing what you want to see." But the old woman's eyes stayed fixed on the darkness where the lion had disappeared. Somewhere deep in her chest, something ancient had awakened, and it would not let her rest. Sleep did not come easily that night. The matriarch lay beside the dying fire, her mind still filled with the golden eyes that had met hers. When she finally drifted into a restless dream, she found herself standing in a vast desert of light. The lion was there, silent again, but beneath his paws the sand shimmered, rippling like water. From the ground, a spring began to rise, clear and endless, spreading across the dunes until the desert bloomed green. She reached out to touch it and woke to the sound of dry wind and coughing camels. She sat up, her chest tight, but her eyes bright. "I have seen it," she whispered. "The water, he showed me where it flows." She gathered the elders at dawn, her voice trembling, yet certain as she told them about the dream. Some bowed their heads in hope. Others avoided her eyes. Keelan stood apart, his jaw set. "Mother," he said, "dreams don't bring water. We need to move north before it's too late." His tone was careful, but his words cut through the morning air. Around them, the people murmured, half with faith, half with doubt. "The lion came for a reason," she insisted. "If we follow his path, we'll find what we've lost." Keelan turned away, staring at the horizon where the sun bled into the sand. "And if you're wrong, how many more will die chasing a vision?" The silence that followed was heavy. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost to herself. "Then I will go alone." He looked back at her, his mother small against the burning sky, her face carved with years of storms and prayers. For the first time, Keelan felt afraid, not of the desert, but of what her faith might demand. Far beyond the camp, the sand shifted. A trail of paw prints led east, fading in and out of the wind. and before the sun was high, the matriarch began to pack her things. The morning sun rose like a furnace, washing the land in white heat. By then, the matriarch was already walking beyond the camp's edge, her shawl trailing behind her like smoke. Keelan followed, silent but unwilling to let her vanish into the desert alone. Behind them, no one spoke, until a small figure darted from the tents. It was Lyra, the youngest girl of the tribe, clutching a tattered water skin and a carved wooden bird. "You'll need me," she said breathlessly. "The spirits listen to children." Keelan frowned, ready to send her back, but his mother placed a hand on the girl's head. "Let her come. Perhaps the lion sent her too." And so the three of them began their journey east, toward the dunes no one dared to cross, the desert of whispers. The wind there was said to carry voices of the dead, but to the matriarch it was the sound of guidance. She walked with purpose, eyes fixed on the faint line of paw prints glimmering across the sand. By midday, the heat was merciless. The sand burned their feet, the air shimmered like a mirage. Keelan stopped, sweat streaking his face. "There's nothing out here," he said. "No lion, no water, only death." But Lyra pointed ahead. "Look." In the distance, half buried by the wind, were new tracks, fresh, larger than before, as if the lion had just passed. The matriarch smiled faintly, whispering a prayer. "He waits for us." That night they found shelter among black stones, the sky burning with stars. The matriarch stared east, her lips moving silently. Keelan watched her, torn between love and anger. "You follow a shadow," he said. She didn't answer. Instead, she traced a line in the sand with her finger, the shape of a lion's paw. "Not a shadow," she murmured, "a memory of what we forgot to believe in." The desert wind rose again, scattering her drawing into nothingness. But when dawn came, new footprints stretched ahead, leading them deeper into the unknown. By the third day, the desert began to turn cruel. The wind no longer whispered. It hissed, clawing at their faces and stealing the breath from their lungs. Their water was nearly gone. The matriarch's steps slowed, her robe dragging like the shadow of her years. Keelan tried to shield her from the wind, but frustration burned through his exhaustion. "This is madness," he said, his voice raw. "We're chasing ghosts across a graveyard." The matriarch stopped and faced him. Her lips were cracked, but her eyes were clear. "You think faith is easy?" she asked quietly. "Faith begins where reason dies." He looked away, unable to answer. The sun climbed higher, and the air shimmered with heat. In the distance, the dunes seemed to move like waves. Lyra stumbled, her small frame trembling. Keelan caught her before she fell. "She can't go on," he said. "None of us can." But the girl lifted a shaking hand and pointed toward the sand. "Look," she whispered. There, half buried beneath drifting dust, were paw prints. New ones, deep and sharp, leading east. The matriarch knelt beside them, brushing the sand away. Her fingers trembled as if touching something sacred. "He's still ahead of us," she breathed. "He hasn't abandoned us." Keelan closed his eyes, torn between anger and the faint, impossible spark of hope. He wanted to curse the desert, the lion, the silence. But something in the air shifted. A cool gust brushed across his face, carrying the scent of rain that wasn't there. They followed the prints until nightfall, their silhouettes small against the horizon. When they finally stopped, the matriarch knelt and prayed softly, her voice a thread against the wind. Lyra joined her, repeating the words. Keelan stood apart, staring at the endless dark. Behind him, the dunes moved like breathing things. He wanted to believe, but belief demanded surrender, and surrender to him felt like death. As the stars emerged, he whispered to the night, "If there's something out there, show me." The desert gave no answer, only silence, and the faint glimmer of paw prints waiting in the moonlight. By dusk, the horizon darkened with clouds, a rare sight in a land that had forgotten rain. The matriarch lifted her head, believing it to be a blessing. But Keelan felt a chill that had nothing to do with wind. The air thickened, the light turned copper. Then the storm came. It struck without warning. A roar of wind tore across the desert, lifting walls of sand that blotted out the sun. The three of them shouted, but their voices vanished into the howl. Lyra's small hand slipped from Keelan's grip. He turned, blinded, calling her name again and again. The matriarch stumbled, and Keelan caught her, wrapping his arms around her frail body as the storm devoured the world. The sky disappeared. There was no up or down, only a swirling cage of sand and sound. For hours, it seemed, they fought to stay upright, their breath raw and their eyes burning. Then the wind shifted, and through the haze, Keelan saw it. A dark figure standing on a dune above them. It was the lion, its mane whipped like fire in the storm, its eyes fixed on him. For a heartbeat, the chaos fell silent. Then, as if swallowed by the wind, the creature was gone. When the storm finally broke, the desert lay still. The stars returned, cold and sharp. Keelan coughed, his throat lined with dust. The matriarch lay beside him, half buried, her breathing shallow but steady. Lyra was nowhere in sight. He dug through the sand until his hands bled, shouting her name. Nothing, only the sound of shifting dunes. As he fell to his knees, something brushed his arm. A single golden strand, a lion's hair, rested against the sand, glimmering under the moonlight. Keelan closed his fist around it, his chest aching. For the first time, he didn't know whether he was clinging to hope or madness. He looked toward the east, where the lion had stood, and whispered hoarsely, "If you're real, bring her back." The desert was silent once more, but far off, carried faintly on the wind, came the echo of a distant roar, low, haunting, and alive. Night draped itself over the desert like a heavy cloth, muffling every sound. Keelan sat beside the small fire he'd built, his mother resting weakly under a thin blanket of wool. Her breathing was shallow, but her hand still clutched the prayer beads that had guided her through a lifetime of storms. The strand of golden fur lay near the flames, shimmering as if alive. He had searched until his strength failed, calling Lyra's name into the endless dark. Now, only the whisper of wind answered him. "She's gone," he murmured, his voice breaking. "All this for a dream." The matriarch stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, clouded but bright with something deeper than pain. "Dreams are not lies, my son," she said. "They are paths. Only the brave can walk them." Keelan turned away, his jaw tight. Faith doesn't bring water. It doesn't bring her back. Before the matriarch could answer, the ground beneath them trembled. A low, distant rumble rose through the sand, deep and rolling, until it became unmistakable, a roar. It was not near, yet it filled the air as if the desert itself were speaking. The matriarch sat up, clutching her chest. "He calls," she whispered. "He calls us east." Keelan stared into the darkness, his heart pounding. The roar came again, echoing between the dunes, guiding and haunting at once. He stood slowly, scanning the horizon. Above, a line of stars curved toward the same direction. Then he saw it, the faint shape of a bird circling against the moonlight. "Lyra's falcon," he breathed. The matriarch smiled faintly. "She's alive. The lion watches over her." Without another word, Keelan lifted his mother to her feet. They followed the sound, step by step, into the cold night. The sand glowed pale beneath the moon, and the roar came again, closer this time, powerful, steady, alive. Keelan no longer knew whether it came from the beast, the wind, or the beating of his own heart. All he knew was that it pulled him forward, through fear, through doubt, toward whatever waited beyond the horizon. And for the first time, he did not resist. The night stretched long, carrying them across the dunes until the first faint light of dawn brushed the sky. Keelan supported his mother as they climbed the final ridge. Her breath was ragged, each step a quiet act of will. Then, as they reached the top, the earth below them changed color, from lifeless gold to a deep, glimmering green. For a moment, Keelan thought it was another mirage. But the air was different here, cooler, carrying the unmistakable scent of wet earth. The matriarch sank to her knees, tears cutting through the dust on her cheeks. Below them lay a hollow in the desert, hidden by the dunes. An oasis ringed with palms, the water clear and still beneath the morning sun. And there, beside the water's edge, was Lyra. The girl was alive, her dress torn and dusty, but her eyes were bright. She ran toward them, laughing and crying at once. "He brought me here," she said breathlessly. "The lion showed me the way." Keelan knelt and pulled her close, his heart breaking with relief. The matriarch raised her face to the sky, whispering words too soft to hear. "You see," she said to her son, "the desert remembers those who listen." They drank deeply from the pool, the water cool as forgiveness. Keelan looked into its surface and saw their reflections, 3 weary travelers, bound not by blood or belief, but by the strange grace that had led them here. By afternoon, the oasis shimmered with life. Birds gathered in the palms, and distant herds approached cautiously. When Keelan climbed a dune to send a signal of smoke, the wind shifted, carrying it back toward the horizon, toward home. Within days, the tribe would find them. The wells would flow again. That night, as the fire crackled beside the new water, Keelan turned to his mother. "You were right," he said quietly. The matriarch smiled faintly. "No, my son, it was not I who was right. It was the lion." She looked east, toward the shadowed dunes, where the sound of a single roar rolled once more across the stars. The sun rose quiet and golden over the oasis, casting long shadows across the water. The tribe had arrived 2 days earlier, their faces filled with disbelief and wonder. Life had returned, the camels drank, the children laughed, and the matriarch's name was spoken with reverence. But even in the joy, Keelan noticed how his mother's gaze often drifted beyond the palms, toward the open dunes. On the 3rd morning, she woke before anyone else. The air was cool, the sky still pale. She stood slowly, her body frail but her spirit bright, and began to walk toward the east. Keelan followed at a distance, careful not to break the silence between them. At the top of the rise, she stopped. There, standing on the far dune, was the lion. His mane shimmered in the morning light, his posture proud yet calm. For a long, suspended moment, they looked at each other, the woman who had believed and the creature who had led her. "Thank you," she whispered. "You carried us when faith was too heavy to bear." The lion lifted his head toward the sun. As its light grew stronger, his golden shape began to blur, dissolving into the glow until nothing remained but the wind. The sand where he had stood was smooth, except for a single line of prints, fresh, perfect, and turning toward the rising sun. Keelan reached his mother's side. She was smiling, tears bright in her eyes. "He's gone," he said softly. "No," she replied. "He's gone home." That evening, the tribe built a small cairn of stone at the place where the prince ended. Upon the largest rock, Keelan carved the image of a lion's paw facing east. The oasis became their new home, and travelers who passed through called it the Water of the Silent One. Years later, when Keelan told the story to his own children, he never claimed to understand what had happened. He only said this: "Sometimes the desert speaks, and when it does, you must listen." Beyond the dunes, the wind rose again, soft, steady, and filled with the faint echo of a roar that would never die. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Before you scroll away, tell me this. Do you believe a bond like theirs could really exist? If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might just remind you that sometimes the wild loves us back in ways we'll never forget.